Hey there, art nerds. In today's installment of our Supergranulating series, we're talking about Daniel Smith, we're talking about Van Gogh dust colors, and we're taking a look at Schmincke's Random Gray. And I'm doing all of this through the lens of a comic artist to see if these watercolors would work well as simple, evocative, and atmospheric panel backgrounds. I hope you are as ready as I am to put these to the test. I've been using Primatech and Daniel Smith Supergranulating Watercolors in my art for a while now. In a lot of my tutorials, you guys probably hear me talk about Undersea Green and how much I like it and how much I enjoy the color splits. So here are some swatches of the Primatech and Supergranulating colors that I own. These are the ones that I specially selected because they kind of have the most impressive granulation or color splits. And here are also the 4 Van Gogh dust colors that Kabocha sent me a while back. So I am working on this big project where I'm basically duping coloring using this kind of tag punch system. And you can find these tag punches like everywhere. I'll link some for you guys down in the description below. And basically what you do is you use your paper of choice. I am using cold pressed cotton rag watercolor paper, and you actually need to go ahead and cut it into rectangles. So you need to measure it out and cut it to size. And you have some variability for what kind of tags you make, what kind of lengths you make, what size you make. So while I like that, I was kind of hoping for a tag punch that I could just put the paper in and it would literally punch out a whole tag. This is a little bit more labor than I was expecting, but I do like that it allows for more customizability and more variability. So I'm going ahead and marking out all of the measurements that I want for my tags so I can go ahead and punch them. Now that it's all marked out, I'm going to use my paper cutter to get some nice trimmed rectangles. I'm going to try to use every scrap of this paper I can, even if some of them are smaller than others. Like I said, for this tag maker to work, everything has to basically be cut down to size beforehand. So it's a little bit more labor, and you could honestly do all this effort and then just use a hole punch to punch a hole at the top. It really does not have to be fancy. So what I'm looking to do with this is I am looking to make swatches that can go on like a binder ring that might be a little bit more convenient for me to bring with me to David's or another art supply store. I do have a swatch book, but I actually ran out of room for that, and I wanted something that was kind of brand specific. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-activate all of my watercolors. I've got my tags all punched out, and here comes the satisfying part. So we're going to have a mass tone swatch at the top, and then I'm applying water, and I'm just going to dab it in and really encourage it to granulate. I'm just going to work my way through all of these colors. So not only did you guys get a review with this one, but you're also getting a mini tutorial if you think this looks neat, helpful, useful. I also just think it looks kind of aesthetic, and I'd love to have a pegboard where I have all the different brands of watercolor I have on rings all sorted out so I could easily grab them. That would be so cool and so handy, and it would also look really good too. here are all our pretty swatches all laid out. I'm going to label them after they've had a chance to dry, but I love how they both demonstrate how the mass tone looks as well as how they granulate out. Hopefully this will make for an easy reference tool so I can pick exactly the type of granulation I need. So here we are with the main event. I actually wanted to create a reference to see how different colors work as backgrounds for comic panels. This is the big Supergranulation project, right? Now we've just finally gotten to Daniel Smith and the Van Gogh watercolors. And I actually have like 3 more brands that I need to finish up before this series is done. The Martini, the Kusakabe, and the White Knight. So if you enjoy these Supergranulation videos, give me some love. Let me know down in the comments and make sure you stick around for those because these videos take weeks of work to do. They are so much effort, and while I enjoy doing them, hearing back from you guys and getting some love from you guys would really mean the world to me. So I wanted to share some of my sketching, drawing, and inking process with you guys because this is also something that I don't necessarily share as much as I would like here on the channel, just because, to be really honest, the strain of recording myself drawing in traditional media with a camera on is sometimes a little bit much. It has to be done in a specific way. Otherwise, it's hard to see what I'm doing. My head's covering what I'm doing. My blotter paper's covering what I'm doing. I'm working at a weird angle. I'm just on top of the art. So I have to kind of pick my battles and select illustrations that kind of lend themselves better to this process. So when I can share it with you guys, I want to share it with you guys, and I am happy to share it with you guys here. So for the Daniel Smith and Van Gogh, I decided to do toys and art supplies with care. So all of these little mini tests are themed around one set topic. So I got to draw Kara with art supplies and with toys, and I really wanted to focus on them being Lilliputian toys or scaled for Lilliputian. So you guys are going to see like a lot of Acorn tops and a lot of cocktail umbrellas and a cocktail sword as well. Speaking of, if you like the tiny world and you like my art, did you know that I have a watercolor webcomic? You can read 7-inch Kara for free at 7inchkara.com. I would love to know what you think, and if you enjoy it, please do me the honor, do me the favor of telling a friend. Your positive word of mouth does so much more than me bragging about it. So I hope you guys will check it out. You can read it for free at 7inchkara.com, or if you are a fan of the Dead Tree format, aka books, like I am, I'm a bit of a book hoarder, you can purchase your own copies through the Natto Shop and through Amazon. I'll have links for you guys down in the description below. So we are just going to work our way through sketching and inking these, and I allow the inks to cure for at least 24 hours before I erase the sketch underneath and before I add any watercolor. once I've got all my little cookies of Blick Cotton Rag sketched and inked and erased and scanned, I can start painting them. And I'm starting with the backgrounds first, and I'm going to let that dry before painting the individual characters. And it just kind of works out better for batch processing this way. It also gives you guys a chance to really focus on how the colors granulate and how the colors handle. And I am working in order, so you guys can find the order that I am painting in and find what colors I'm doing listed out for you guys down in the description below, but it's also written on the back of the card. So each of these activities has been kind of curated to go with the color that I use for it. And that was a little more tricky with the Daniel Smiths because we don't get some of the wild, vibrant color splits with the Daniel Smith Primatex and with the Daniel Smith Supergranulating colors than we saw with Supervision or that I'm seeing with Kusakabe or with Martini. Something that I like about Daniel Smith's granulating colors is that there are a lot of more subdued colors. I know I was literally just pointing out that we're not going to get the wild color splits that would be so great for panel backgrounds, but they are really nice for painting nature, especially the greens with painting, say, pond scenes or foliage scenes, because that granulation just adds this extra to it, that when you add some water to it, it really starts to diffuse out. And I know that there is a little bit of controversy regarding Daniel Smith Primatech, the actual mineral usage, as well as pigmentation versus the use of not so light fast dyes. And I'm not going to really reheat that drama here, as I've pointed out in pretty much every video I do. The kind of work that I do is mainly meant for reproduction, so I am not as concerned with my art lasting 100 years as some artists might be. I would like it to last 10 years, but most of my art is stored in archival portfolios where it very rarely sees the light of day. In fact, these little cookies are actually being stored in baseball card holders, so those are also archival. So I'm not the one to really comment a whole lot about light fastness, but I am going to link some of the resources I found about this topic in the show notes for those interested. The gist is that Daniel Smith's Primatex are not just the minerals advertised, but often include other pigments, like their amethyst includes other pigments, and occasionally dye, and it may not be as light fast as it claimed. And since I'm talking about them today, I did think it was worth mentioning that so you can research it a little bit more in case that is something that is important to you. I didn't want to lead you guys down the daisy train. So it hasn't actually stopped me from using Daniel Smith when the occasion calls. Much of my art is painted for reproduction. Like I mentioned earlier, I am a watercolor comic artist, although I do have originals available to purchase. So I don't want them to just start fading immediately. I do want them to last for some amount of time since I am selling them. That said, I can definitely see how it would bother other artists, and I felt like it was worth mentioning just for the sake of transparency. Most of the other supergranulating watercolors that I've reviewed, minus perhaps Schmincke, have similar additives, so this is pretty common with these supergranulating colors. This is how you get those really wild, intense splits. And while I'm not justifying it, and there are pigments that have more staining than granulating properties that you could add to a more granulating color, like for example, you could do a smalt blue and a phthalo blue green, and you would get those wild splits. I'm actually kind of surprised that there isn't some company like Core isn't doing that, for example. I would love to see those kind of wild splits using the quinacridones and the phthalos from a company that makes really nice professional quality paints. Because to be real, a lot of these super granulating watercolors, minus again the Schmincke, they're made by companies that, other than Daniel Smith, are often considered student grade or have student grade properties to their paints. It seems like the colors with fading issues, and this is not an all-inclusive list, are Shadow Violet, Moonglow, and Amethyst. And as I mentioned, it isn't my intention to stoke the fires of this controversy, but I also didn't want to completely gloss over it either. I do realize that doing this type of review this many years after this has all been brought to light might seem like I'm unaware of it, or that I'm hiding information about it, or that I might work for Daniel Smith and have a vested interest in not talking about it. And none of those things are actually true. I don't work for Daniel Smith. I have no interest in hiding it. It just doesn't necessarily affect the type of work that I'm making or what I want to make with these watercolors. So I am going to review it anyway, because let's be real, not all watercolor artists work exclusively for the one-to-one medium of you create a piece and you sell it to somebody. Some of us are doing art prints, some of us are making comics, some of us are doing picture books, some of us are doing illustrations. Watercolor is more than just the immediacy of the paint on the paper. And while it's a beautiful thing, there may be people watching this who are interested in the granulating properties who would not be bothered by the archival issues or the light fast issues. Now, I haven't read anything in my research about it like eating through the paper or anything like that. It's really about fading issues, and people are mostly unhappy that Daniel Smith has not been very honest about these issues and not very forthright about these issues, and that some people who are official representatives and work in an official, sometimes ownership capacity of the company, have not been particularly gracious in how they respond to customer concerns. So, you know, I didn't want to not talk about it. So now we're getting into the Van Gogh Dusk colors. And the way these work is they use PBK 11, so a lunar black style pigment. This is a heavily granulating black pigment. And then they use, I believe, like quin magenta, phthalo green, dioxine purple, and then I believe a quin yellow or a quin gold. I might be wrong about that. I'm working off the top of my head for this. So these are colors that would actually not have the same light fast issues, because they're not necessarily working with dyes. They're working with just more standard synthetic pigments. I also wanted to test out Schmincke's Random Gray, since I was able to get a hold of a tube of it. And the way this is made is basically like it's the scrapings from the extrusion, and it's all kind of mixed together to make this really beautiful random gray, where, you know, every batch is going to be a little bit different. And I love the fact that they're trying to get the most out of their pigments. They're trying to be as low waste as possible, and the random element just really appeals to me. So I thought it would be fun to include it as part of this one here. It probably could have been its own mini video, but since I had a lot of batch painting to do, as you guys can see, I am setting myself up for the batch painting. I figured I might as well throw in the dust colors as well as random gray. So to the left, everything but the bottom Cara, the one wearing a bucket hat and holding a plush frog, is all Daniel Smith. The one at the bottom that I just mentioned is Schmincke Random Gray. And then over to the right on the brown chipboard are our Van Gogh Dusk colors. And I'm just applying a little bit of artist tape to the back of each of these little cookies to just kind of hold them in place while I'm doing our batch painting. And just for full disclosure, probably a couple of months passed between me doing the backgrounds and doing the granulation splits and me doing this batch painting, because like I said, this takes a really, really long time to do. And sometimes I just don't have that amount of time in one sitting. So fortunately, I can kind of find discrete stops, be able to put it aside for a while, and then pick it up again later. Unfortunately, that often means I lose my train of thought, which is kind of frustrating, but it is what it is. So as I mentioned earlier, this isn't all inclusive of all of the granulating or PrimaTek colors that Daniel Smith has. Some of them were sent to me by friends. Some of them were colors that I picked up myself based on my own interests. So it's not meant to be totally representative. My favorite would be Undersea Green, although Cascade Green is also really nice. And I also find myself using Lunar Black, which I'm looking at this now. Yeah, okay. So Lunar Black is at the top row. It's the fifth one. It's Cara holding a flashlight. I use that one a lot as like a final layer on top of other watercolors to just kind of create an air of mystery or to create an air of depth. One thing I will say for the most part with these is they should be your final layer or they should be your only layer. Trying to glaze on top of them, especially like Lunar Black, can really cause a lot of liftability and can really mess up the particle distribution or even lift some up in general. So they don't really play so well as like glaze colors, if you know what I mean. I say that, but I use Undersea Green like all the time. It's in my daily driver palette as well. It's on basically every comic page. So some are a little better behaved than others. We also have the other lunar colors like Lunar Blue, Lunar Red Rock, and I think I'm missing Lunar Earth. And those are the ones other than Lunar Blue that have like the really big chunky granulation particles, and they're basically a single color. That isn't necessarily so useful in the work that I am currently doing. I could definitely see them being useful for people painting landscapes and beach scenes where they want that kind of granulation and they may be working with more limited layers or more limited colors. The Van Gogh colors are fun, but I don't use them all that often. As with a lot of these super granulation brands, a lot of these super granulating paints, often these just get relegated to special effects in what I'm doing. So special effects on comic pages, and I hate to admit it, but that's if I even remember to grab them. I need to come up with a system where I can reference these easily. It would be so I have my comics desk in front of a window, so I can't really pin stuff up there, but it would be handy to have all of my super granulation tests pinned up on the wall and then cross-reference to the palettes that they're in, so I can select the palette and put it on my working table when I want to use that for a particular panel. I have ADHD, so like anything that gets me using these things and remembering these things is good. That's actually why I created these little cookies in the first place, was a comic page reference so I could see the kind of mood, atmosphere, and effect they could give as a background. So this review is not necessarily intended to review these as a watercolor that you use as part of a larger illustration as like one of the layers. It's meant to kind of see how these would work as an all background color and what kind of granulation they have and what kind of mood and atmosphere they can add to the illustration. I also like sharing this process because it's kind of similar to how I handle comic pages in general, where especially if it is just an atmospheric background, I'll go ahead and knock that out in the toning and early stages, and I basically paint everything in batch. So all the skin tones, all the hair colors, and then I start doing the clothing, especially if it's like outfit changes throughout a scene, like in chapter 7 where Kara's trying on a bunch of Barbie clothes. Then that gets kind of held back until later. So this is kind of a neat little snippet of how I think about and how I handle comic pages and how I handle batch painting. And if you're curious about how I handle comic pages, I've got like 3 playlists where I talk about that in great detail. I'll try to remember to link them down in the description below for you guys if you guys are curious about making comics or painting comics, or even about improving your drawing skills, because my Making Comics and Zines playlist has a lot of just good basic composition and drawing tutorials that I think you guys will enjoy if you haven't checked them out yet. It also kind of gives you guys a chance to see how I handle the paints themselves as well as my palettes. So I have a lot of ceramic plate palettes that are just cheap Dollar Tree ceramic plates that allow me to mix up a good amount but not an excessive amount of single colors. So they're really good for painting clothing. You guys see I switched it out for another. And what I do is I put the full palette just above or off to the side. I don't go ahead and rinse it off until I'm done, because I may want to revisit those colors as I'm adding detail to those clothing after they've dried. But since I am painting so many different outfits, I need a whole lot of painting space. And while a butcher's tray would probably be helpful for some, I find the rim kind of gets in the way of me accessing the paints, and I don't use as much space as you would think I would use. So this method works a little bit better for me. And then for things where I need a lot of the paint, let's say the skin tone or the hair color, then I'm going to use a weld ceramic palette because I can mix up the amount I need and keep my colors consistent over time. I also did not realize that I recorded the batch painting after I had assembled my Daily Driver palette. So this is my new and improved Daily Driver palette. You guys can see how many colors I have in there and how many convenience colors I have in there. So you can probably understand why I haven't added most of these super granulating colors to this palette, because it is already huge. But you can also see these colors get used. I use convenience colors pretty frequently because as somebody who's painting comic pages or batch painting like this, it is really helpful to just be able to dip into a pan and get most of the color I need and maybe just need to adjust it a little bit with a secondary color. That doesn't work for everybody, but it sure works for comic artists like me. And now we can focus on the little Van Gogh cookies a little bit better. So I really love how simple these are. I think in my initial Van Gogh review, I actually showed how you could very easily dupe this with basically any strong staining color you have, as well as PBK 11. So you can get this kind of effect very easily. And that would be great if you just want like a one-off of it rather than mixing a bunch of it in batch. Feels like you might need to like custom handmade watercolor that. And that was something that I had talked about doing with a friend for a long time, and they seem to have lost interest. And let me be real here, as somebody with ADHD, I need that parallel play. If I'm going to invest myself at this point in something like making handmade paint, I need a buddy to get into it with me with it. Does that sentence make sense? Get into the same hobby as me at the same time so we can do it together and share resources. There we go. Speaking of, I got into watercolor because years ago, my friend Electric Abyss introduced it to me. We were both going to SCAD at the same time and they taught me how to do it and they shared some of their materials with me, and it made getting started so much easier. So I am a big fan of, if you've got a buddy who's already into the art form, ask them to show you, pay them to show you if you can afford to do so, cook for them to show you if that's what it takes, or trade art skills with them. But having somebody who you know who can show you how to do it is so helpful. And it's one of the things I kind of miss about living in Louisiana is I'm having to start all over again with making art friends. Like I had art friends here before I moved, and then they all moved away for better opportunities, and now I'm starting all over again. And I miss having that community of art buddies that we can share supplies with, and we can share resources with, and we can share information and knowledge with. That is a big part of what makes it easier to be an artist, is having that community of people. And once my cookies have dried and they are finished painting, I am finished painting them. Sentences, Becca, what are they? I can remove them from this is Gator board. This is a plastic corrugated cardboard alike thing, and from the chipboard. And here we have our finished watercolor cookies. Aren't they cute? It is also a good opportunity for me to see which of the Daniel Smith Supergrans work well in what kind of comic panel situations. I could see these being great for scenes where Kara might be in a forest or in a tall grass, and I don't necessarily feel like painting every blade of grass. I also use these super granulating colors, particularly like Moonglow and Shadow Violet, when I am painting darker, more atmospheric scenes like a dark room, or painting scenes that are set at night. But they can also be really useful for painting rainy day scenes like we saw with Schmincke's Random Gray. That was just so perfect for kind of misty, rainy day vibes. Here is our Schmincke Random Gray. I purchased mine from St. Louis Art Supply, and I love how it has such nice after the rain vibes. Here are our Van Gogh Dusk colors. We have Dusk Yellow, Dusk Green, Dusk Pink, and Dusk Violet. And here we have everything. So I am going to go from top left all the way to bottom right, starting with Kara with the little bear. That is Daniel Smith Sodalite. Kara with the little boat is Daniel Smith Lunar Blue. Kara with the Fidget toy, and I'm actually referencing my real swatches as I do this, is Blue Apatite Genuine. Kara with the cocktail umbrella is Sleeping Beauty Turquoise. Kara holding the little toy cat is Undersea Green. Kara with the crayons is Green Apatite. Now we're on to the next row. Kara with the harmonica is Serpentine Green. Kara with the fishing pole is Cascade Green. Kara holding the little doll is Lunar Earth. Kara holding the little tambourine is Lunar Red Rock. Kara holding the little cocktail sword is... there it is. All right. Rose of Ultramarine. Now we're on the next row. Kara holding the pencil is Imperial Purple. Kara holding the tiny color pencil coloring set is difficult to find in front of me. I love how I can't find when I'm looking for it, and it takes me a little bit. Ultramarine Violet. Kara tossing the pom-pom up in the air is Moonglow. Kara holding the small watercolor palette and wearing a beret is Shadow Violet. Kara holding the bouncy ball with little glittery stars in it that kind of looks like a Dragon Ball is Lunar Violet. Kara holding a flashlight is Lunar Black. And then we have our Schmincke with Kara holding the frog, and our dusk colors, Dusk Yellow, Dusk Violet, Dusk Pink, and Dusk Green, all by Van Gogh. I hope you found today's Daniel Smith, Van Gogh, and even a single Schmincke color. I hope you guys found the supergranulating demonstration and slight review helpful, useful, and informative. This is particularly one for my comic artists and illustrators who are looking for easy and evocative backgrounds. I am all about saving us a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and a little bit of money. And when you are a comic artist, you are all about finding those shortcuts that work for you, save you some drawing, and still make your comic awesome. Speaking of comics, I really hope you will read my comic, 7-Inch Kara. You can find it at 7inchkara.com, or you can order print copies through the Natto Shop at nattosoup.com/shop, or for my international friends, you can find it on Amazon. I will have links for you guys down in the description below. I will also have all of the color names and pigment information that I can get a hold of for you guys down in the description below, as well as links to the references that I use when talking about the Daniel Smith controversy. Are Daniel Smith's PrimaTek and Supergranulating Watercolors something that you find useful? Is it something that you use in your studio? Or have you switched to other brands for the same effects? Let me know down in the comments below. If you are interested in more supergranulating watercolors, I have reviewed so many of these, and I still have so many in progress. So I hope you guys will check them out. They're all done in this little cookie style here, you know, one for my comic artist friends. And I'll try to link all of those for you guys down in the description. You may be particularly interested in the Schmincke review, so I hope you guys will check it out. Reviews like this one, especially considering how dang time-consuming it was, are made possible thanks to the sponsorship of my patrons on Patreon. Their support allows me to purchase the art supplies that I review here on the channel so that I can give you guys as unbiased an opinion as possible. Of course, all opinions are my own, and you might disagree with me, and that is totally fine, because all artists have their own paths, they have their own needs, and they have their own preferences, and that is cool. Just because I like or dislike something does not mean you are wrong or your tastes are wrong. It just means we have different opinions. So let me know what you think of the Daniel Smith PrimaTek watercolors down in the description below. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope you found this inspiring, helpful, useful, and informative, and I hope This will help you guys make art a habit. I look forward to seeing you guys again soon, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, guys!